Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Hello, everybody.
Ruben Bressler.
What's up? Everything is nothing. Time to talk about some wingdings.
It's wingding time. Time to get weird and strange.
Wingding 30.
Yes.
Yeah, we can't even up in here, perhaps. But
That's right.
I know that we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Rebecca Gay cards. Ruben?
Well, the king of this week's comment section is Carrie Kingdom, who writes, clearly, the team is holding back cards for future top 10 Rogers and Hammerstein references in Magic, because how else could we exclude Enchanted Evening? Watercolor requires absolute mastery, and mistakes are much harder to correct than in other media. Enchanted Evening's beautiful use of light and reflections would alone warrant its inclusion, but creating that effect in such an unforgiving medium is a testament to Gay's mastery. The card also combos with fellow Rebecca Gay classic Calming Verse to make sure everyone at your table hates you forever.
Ugh.
Yes,
Love
very
it.
nice. For those who don't know, from Shadowmoor, it is a rare. It is 2 Azorius mana and 3 generic mana. So 5 mana total. 2 of it can be blue or white. It is a rare enchantment. This is all permanents are enchantments in addition to their other types.
Yep.
So
Yeah, that was a really good review. That was a good comment.
yeah, I liked it. And this was a fantastic piece. And like, there's something about watercolor that like, it just blows my mind. Like when you see a really detailed, eloquent piece of watercolor, I'm like, how did they do all of that? How do they control the flow of the water? Like,
exactly.
It blows my mind.
Don't is the thing. The thing about watercolor is it's water. You don't control water. You just direct it. Being so in tune with such an unforgiving and wild medium is just an art in and of itself, much less actually turning it into another piece of art.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Well, congratulations to Carrie Kingdom. Please contact Erin on social media before she blocks you on all of them. 34K, right? That's the last one?
34K.
34,000 and
Working on it.
growing.
It's like, some people in the morning, they do Tai Chi, they have their coffee. I have my morning blocks. Just
There you
like,
go.
Block, 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 block. Whew, I am ready for the day.
Right.
Thanks again to
I need to be like Lizzo, just twerk while I block.
One twerk, one block. That's how it works. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week. And maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Because it is time to talk about the Eldrazi. We went there originally at the end of Zendikar. This was from Rise of the Eldrazi. This is because they were like, we don't know if land sets are going to work. And then they work like gangbusters.
Turns out they were great. Yeah.
And then, of course, they had to blow up the world like they usually do. And so then they're like, we're going to go back to Zendikar. And we're like, yes, Indiana Jones. And they're like, no, Freakazoids. And we're like,
Well, we came back. Well, we did have the Rise of the Eldrazi, and then when we returned, it was still Eldrazi world.
Yes, it was.
We did need to close that book. We did need to defeat the Eldrazi.
No, we didn't. Absolutely not. We could have just went right back to Indiana Jones.
Well, the good news is that now that we've been back to Zendikar, the only proof the Eldrazi was ever there is the Forsaken Monument, and some other smatterings of skeletons and crystalline entities that are around the plane. But we're back now, Evan. It's okay.
It's good. It's better now. It's better these days. Well, let me tell you. Let's get started here with our top 10. Ruben, what's your number 10?
My number 10 is, I think, one of the closest, I guess, that you can get to an Eldrazi lord, I guess. It's like not even a lord, but it does feature a ton of... It's a very Eldrazi-centric Eldrazi in Ruination Guide.
Ooh.
Ruination Guide is 2 colorless and a blue for a 3/2 Eldrazi drone from Battle for Zendikar with Devoid, which means that the card has no color, even though it costs a blue to cast. It has Ingest, which means whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top of part of their library. Yes, it was. But that was sort of like the Eldrazi ability from Battle for Zendikar. And other colorless creatures you control get +1/+0. This, of course, did make an appearance in the Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch winning list, Eldrazi aggro from Ji-Chen Tao, and which was like a red-blue Eldrazi deck, and Ruination Guide being able to pump up your, vile aggregates and all of your other various colorless Eldrazi spawn tokens and things like that was a big deal.
I cannot properly explain how much I hated Battle for Zendikar. I hate these mechanics.
Well, you're going to love this episode.
I hated Devoid. I thought Devoid was just stupid. Devoid, it was just like, here's the worst mechanic for teaching magic ever. It's a blue. No, it's not. Why is it not blue? Because it says it's not, but it's not. Why? What does that matter? Well, now it's not a blue spell. It is a blue spell. No, not unless it's in the battlefield. What is happening? I hate everything about these mechanics. Ingest was weird and dumb. Trying to work with the exile thing.
Yeah, Ingest was trying to give you food to feed to your processors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think the Eldrazi do better as boogeymen, you know, and the idea that, like, and particularly with Battle for Zendikar, they were so proud of the fact that, like, they'd essentially turned them into, like, a tribe where they were like, oh, you know, you'll get to see Eldrazi, like, eating and swimming. And it's like, why? Like, you don't see Freddy Krueger eating and swimming. Like, you know, for me, like, the mystique had been lost and the allure had been lost. And it was, they just felt like everyday, you know, tribes. And I didn't really, I liked them better. I love, you know, one of the things I love about Emrakul is that you don't even know what she's thinking. Like, she's light years ahead of you. And that's the way they should be. I shouldn't see you just chilling by a lake.
Like, you don't see Godzilla sleeping, right?
Yeah,
you don't just see him hanging out, you know, chilling with the
You
bros.
don't see Godzilla under the waves waiting 300 years. You only see Godzilla when it peeks its head out and starts destroying San Francisco.
Yeah.
Right. And trying to, I mean, again, I sort of respect the try, you know, the effort that went into it, but my God, I just did not like any of those cards. All right. Aaron, what's number 10?
My number 10 is a card that didn't see a lot of play, but it has one of the most terrifying pieces of art I've ever seen. I still find myself like looking at it and zooming in on it and being utterly horrified by it. My number 10 is Distended Mindbender.
Sure.
Go zoom in on that baby one of these days. So Distended Mindbender was originally printed in Eldritch Moon, 8 colorless, creature Eldrazi insect, 5 power and 5 toughness with Emerge, which is a really nice mechanic I liked. 5 colorless and 2 black. You can cast the spell by sacrificing a creature and paying the Emerge cost minus that creature's converted mana cost, which really is a nod to Eldritch Moon and Emrakul kind of awaking things into Eldrazi. And then when you cast this card, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose from it a non-land card with converted mana cost 3 or less, and then a card with converted mana cost 4 or greater. So you get a little bit of an Inquisition kind of effect, and then like an Appetite for Brains kind of effect. And then that player discards those cards. So, you know, more of a sideboard card than anything else, but you have like just the feelers being plucked into this guy's head and this guy just freaking out, and it's just terrifying.
Yeah, this saw some play in the green-black Constructor deck, apparently, as a sideboard option.
Constrictor.
Or the Delirium decks,
And the Delirium decks, the Ishkana kind of mid-range.
Yeah, Emerge was one of those, you know, it's always dangerous when they have those cost reduction mechanics.
And I think you could tell, because none of these cards, they were so expensive, even with the Emerge. Like, you could tell that they were really reining that in.
Right. I mean, I think that the one that saw the most play was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Elder Deep Fiend.
Yes, Elder Deep Fiend.
Which saw a lot of play, but was not broken by any stretch. It just was a big scary thing. I mean, a lot like Distended Mindbender as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you have to lose a 5-drop and pay 2 black, and then you can get a really cool 5/5 that gets rid of their cards in hand. So, but by that point, do they even have cards in their hand? Do they have cards that are going to hit by this? Yada yada yada. But it was cool. I appreciate seeing cost reduction mechanics that aren't broken in half. That was very nice.
Emerge was great.
I break them a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's good for you.
Yeah. All right. Well, my number 10 is higher on someone else's list. So we're going to move on here to my number 9, which is also higher on someone else's list. Yeah, let me tell you. So, Ruben, what is your number 9?
My number 9, speaking of probably creatures that Evan hates, is another devoid Eldrazi from Battle for Zendikar. This one did not see as much play in those Eldrazi decks, but it did find a home in 4-color Rally and Golgari Aristocrats and Abhan Company. My number 9 is Catacomb Sifter.
Oh, yeah.
Catacomb Sifter is a colorless, a black, and a green for a 2/3 Eldrazi drone with Devoid. That means it has no color. When Catacomb Sifter enters the battlefield, you make a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion creature token that has sacrifice this creature, add a Wingding, or a colorless. And whenever another creature you control dies, scry 1. Now, of course, in the Abzan Rally decks, you would combine this with your Rally the Ancestors and getting back your Nantuko Husks and various other creatures that ended up in your bin. This would allow you to fix your draws going forward. This was a very solid play on turn 3, as it had a come into play ability. It allowed you to ramp up to 5 if you wanted to. It allowed you to fix your draws going forward. Just a very solid creature.
Oh, for the time, I mean, 3 mana, 3 power, 4 toughness was a fantastic rate. It cracks me up that, one of the big, design breakthroughs was making the Scions, the Eldrazi spawn into the Eldrazi Scion, making an 0/1 to a 1/1. Same exact ability. Well, we made everything better. And we're like, okay.
Well, yeah, you make it less of board stalls when you have, because in the old limited format, you had each player had 5 0/1s, and it's like, well, nobody can do anything.
Well, but you also had Annihilator, and you were playing 8 drops and all sorts of weird stuff. And now it's just this card has no color because reasons.
This card saw a lot of play. I never would have expected that card to be the all-star that it was.
Right?
All right. Aaron, what's number 9?
My number 9, Ruben inadvertently spoiled my number 9, but that's fine. It's a beautiful card. Another one of those cards that when you really zoom in on it, it gets even creepier. And, one of the neat things about Eldritch Moon and Shadows over Innistrad was what they combined Eldrazi into, where you had Eldrazi werewolves and Eldrazi trees. And, I thought that was really, really cool. And then you have Eldrazi Octopus, like my number 9, which is Elder Deep Fiend.
Yep.
Elder Deep Fiend is 8 colorless. It's an Eldrazi Octopus with flash. Why is it?
Yep. Perfect.
5 power and 6 toughness, also with Emerge, 5 colorless and 2 blue. You may cast the spell by sacrificing a creature and paying the Emerge cost reduced by that creature's converted mana cost. When you cast Elder Deep Fiend, tap up to 4 target permanents. That's permanence. And so there was an Emerge deck that saw a little bit of play with Prized Amalgam and various scabs and Faith with Tormenting Voice and things like that. And so that was fun. But this was just one of those cards that, when you really zoom in on it and you realize that the tentacles are impaling people, it's got one guy by the head just lifting him up. It's just some sort of Starship Troopers nightmare. And I think it's glorious. I love it.
Shout out to Elder Jeep Fiend, a longtime supporter of our podcast, named, of course, after this card. This was essentially a Mistbind click. Where instead of championing a fairy, you just sacrifice a creature and have a very similar effect. Being able to tap down lands with this during your opponent's upkeep, for example, or ruining an entire combat step or what have you.
Yeah, this card was the tapping permanence. When you can tap permanents, when you can tap lands at flash speed, that's always very scary. You're in Mistbind click territory type stuff of during your upkeep, you do nothing this round, or do nothing this turn. And so that's kind of dangerous, and that was why it was so kind of exciting at times. But again, this was a cost reduction mechanic that wasn't broken. It was just actually very good, and I'm okay with that. All right, so let's move on here to number 8. Ruben, what's number 8?
My number 8 is a card that, once again, was not in that famous Eldrazi deck that won Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch, but actually, ironically, became more popular and saw more play when that deck left. The classic Eldrazi aggro decks, the red-blue and the all colorless decks, really were hampered by the loss of Eye of Ugin. But in its stead, there were a couple of decks that came up again, and one of them was a Bant Eldrazi deck.
Yeah.
And also, this card saw play in just Collected Company. This card saw play in, just a bunch of other decks of modern, and a little bit in Standard, but mostly Modern. And, of course, Vintage. Because who doesn't love blinking stuff with Eldrazi Displacer?
Don't even get me started. I hate this card.
This card is insane.
Two generic and a white gets you a 3/3 Eldrazi with Devoid. 2 colorless and a Wingding. That's a colorless mana for you folks at home. Exile another target creature, then return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So you can use this effect either offensive or defensively. Offensively, of course, you can blink your come into play abilities, your reflector mages, your whatever, what have you. Then, of course, defensively, you can tap down your opponent's blockers, your opponent's oath creatures that come into play, all of those kind of things. And in Vintage, you have a ton of extra mana laying around once you've got your Chalice on 1 down.
You've got all these out.
Yeah, you've got can't really play, you can't pay for it with workshops.
Oh, because it's not an artifact.
You've got your ancient tombs laying around, you got your Eldrazi temples laying around doing nothing, but now you can blink them. you can protect your containment priest from removal.
Well,
From
no, you're
Aaron's
doing,
removal.
or you can, what you can do is you blink that, and then containment priest means it doesn't come back.
Oh,
And it's
dear.
exiling
Yeah.
another target creature, any target creature, anywhere
And
on
because
the
So you
you
board.
didn't
target
pay
your
for it.
opponents. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
this card is obnoxious. I have gone on many rants about this card just didn't need to exist. You know, you blink it, you pair it with Thought Not Seer, and you're just kind of taking apart hands, and this card just did not need to exist. I have very strong feelings about this card.
This is, I mean, it just, even when it came out at the time, it was like, wow, that is really pushed. That's really what
very
you
pushed.
want.
Yeah.
That's
And
what
I
you want to
would
be the
say
best
it's-
thing in the format, to be
Yeah.
bouncing things like this.
Yep.
Like,
And I would say it's one of the best white cards that's been printed in modern
Yeah.
memory, but it's not white.
The way that it invalidates token strategies, the way that it makes combat a nightmare. I
Yeah,
mean, I just don't know what they were thinking.
it
was
felt
so
very
good.
similar to when they printed Restoration Angel, and you're like, Thragtusk
Yeah.
exists. What are you doing? What is happening right
Eldrazi
now?
Displacer pretty much by itself made Brushland a card that's worth money.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty much by itself.
Yeah, making that wing thing is important. Aaron, what's number 8?
My number 8 is an all-star in my She-Ray EDH deck. People predicted that this card would see play in Standard. It had all of the earmarks of like a Sam Black kind of card. You know, it had the makings of like an aristocrat, you know, all-star, and it didn't really see much play if I remember correctly, but I love it in Commander. It's less than $1, so it's a great budget card. It's an engine in and of itself. My number 8 is Smothering Abomination. So Smothering Abomination is 2 colorless and 2 black. It was originally printed in Battle for Zendikar with Devoid. 4 power, 3 toughness, and flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. And then whenever you sacrifice a creature, regardless of why you're doing it, you can draw a card. So this is a sack outlet by itself. If you happen to have other sacrificing going on, that works too. And if you're playing things like a bunch of crappy scions, you don't mind feeding it to this thing. But, you know, the point is that you're drawing cards and you have enough food to keep this thing going. It's also just a 4/3 beater if you need it to be for 4, which you'll take. But, you know, I love this in my She-Ray deck. You know, being able to sacrifice creatures and then getting them back with She-Ray, you know, burying my opponent in card advantage. This just feels really, really good.
Yeah, this was the ideal card to pair up with From Beyond. Like in Standard, the dream was From Beyond, which makes a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion every round or every upkeep. With this card, lets you just draw an extra card every turn, no matter what. Yay! But their costs are a little weird. They're both 4 drops. Like they're 4 drops. They don't do anything when they enter the battlefield, either of them. And so, kind of didn't get there.
Smothering Abomination did have all the numbers. The problem was that format, you couldn't really afford to play a 3 toughness creature that didn't do anything on turn 4,
right?
Like without support. Like this card would have helped you if you were ahead already, but it never like would have brought you from behind. Super good engine though, and it's like Graveborn Muse, but powered up for an Eldrazi strategy.
Yeah.
You know, for my number 8, there's certain things that Wizards cannot put back in the tube. The toothpaste they have squeezed out everywhere, and you're like, well, we're stuck with it, even whether you like it or not. And I understand it didn't take very long for them to kind of sour on the idea of tribal stuff, tribal sorceries, tribal instants.
I missed them.
I love the
I do
flavor.
too. I
I
miss them
thought it
too.
was cool. I don't care if you like, feel free to make a tribal lightning bolt or don't make one. It doesn't bother me either way. I don't care. Because I thought it was really cool. It's very thematic. When you have this gigantic tribal sorcery Eldrazi that is dust.
Yep.
Like this helped define
I love this card.
what Eldrazi is to Magic players, how it really defines colorless above all, how it kind of makes colorless feel like a color.
Yeah.
All this does is 7 generic mana. Just so happens to be Urza mana.
Yes.
And it is a rare, it's a
mana,
mythic. It's a mythic originally from Rise of the Eldrazi.
Right.
And it is a tribal sorcery Eldrazi, and each player sacrifices all colored permanents they control.
And if you happen to be playing a Cloud Post deck or a Tron deck, you just happen to have all colorless permanents.
Right.
And so, whee!
Exactly.
Oops, all your permanents.
And it gets around indestructible, which is crazy.
Yeah.
It gets around hexproof like any board wipe.
Yeah.
It gets everything. It gets your planeswalkers, your creatures, your enchantments, whatever it is. All is dust is just a spectacular magic.
Love the flavor card. I remember it being really expensive. It's down to about $5 or $6 now, which is great. This is the card that you want to reprint, so that this is one of those cards that's meant to be. We're so grateful it got reprinted because it should be $6. Like, yes, this is fine.
Yes, absolutely. Enchanted Evening that we started talking about, like, because that's on, I believe, the mystery booster or the list, it's down to like $7, which is kind of where it should be. Like, it's a $7 card. It's not a $20+ card of what it used to be. Right. And they finally reprinted it. All this does also has a terrific Grand Prix promo.
Yep.
That's really cool.
I remember the Grand Prix promo.
Yeah, very cool from Vincent Proce. Look that one up. It's very nice. All right, so let's move on to number 7. Ruben, what you got?
So my first 4 on my list, I had Ruination Guide, which is a blue devoid. I had Catacomb Sifter, which is a black-green devoid. I had Eldrazi Displacer, which is a white devoid.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I was going to have, I kind of thought to myself, I knew I was going to have this card on my list. I might as well put Eldrazi Obligator at number 7.
Did you feel obligated to do it?
I felt a little obligated, to do it. I love Eldrazi Obligator. Oh my god, this card, my win condition or my win percentage when casting an Eldrazi Obligator is through the roof. Eldrazi Obligator is a 3/1 with haste for 3 mana, 2 color or 2 generic and a red for an Eldrazi with Devoid from Oath of the Gatewatch. When you cast it, you may pay a colorless and a wingding. If you do, gain control of target creature until end of turn, untap that creature, and it gains haste until end of turn. So sort of kicker, except for the kicker part can't be countered. You just get the creature. Yeah. It's crazy. I love this card.
It does target it, and it has haste itself. So it's a 3-mana 3/1 haster on turn 3 at worst. It's a great top deck. It often killed people out of nowhere. They drop some giant monster. You're like, okay, awesome, thank you. Come here and kill you. And that's how that one worked. This was definitely part of the aggro decks of the time. Yes. And I guess it was okay.
What?
I just didn't like much of what was going on back then, so it's okay.
Get out of here. Obviously, this card was also in the Eldrazi aggro deck that won Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch.
Yes. Aaron, what's number 7?
My number 7 is a card that came out of nowhere. It was a card that nobody really played. It was just so bizarre. It was so weird. And then all of a sudden, it became a tier 1 deck in Pioneer. And before we knew it, everybody was trying to get copies of it. There was even talk of the card being banned because the deck was so oppressive. It was one of the 2 combo decks that people thought really made Pioneer unfun. And people have even tried to port it over into other formats to varying degrees of success. My number 7 is Inverter of Truth. So Inverter of Truth is 2 colorless and 2 black. It's from Oath of the Gatewatch. A 6/6 devoid flying Eldrazi, which is fine for 4 mana. You'll take that, but there's a catch, as there often is with this. When an Inverter of Truth enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your library face down, and then shuffle all cards from your graveyard into your library. So this paired very well with Thassa's Oracle. You would build this sort of black-blue control deck with Dig Through Time and a couple counter spells, and you would get to a point where you would be able to just whoop, and then you'd play your Thassa's Oracle, and then you'd scry, and you'd win the game. And so this was a really dominant deck for quite a while. I think it's been tampered down a little bit, but I'll never forget hearing the rumors of this card. We had somebody in our Discord that was warning us, like, hey, I'm hearing rumblings that, this is going to happen. And I was like, what? And then
they banned it in Pioneer.
They banned it in Pioneer. This was essentially the twin equivalent in Pioneer.
Yes, it was gross.
Basically, you would build a control deck, and then you'd just shove a copy of the combo in your deck, much like you would do with Twin. Like, you just have blue control spells, you'd have some black discard, you'd make sure your opponent couldn't interact with you, you just did nothing, and then you pay 6 mana, you play Inverter, and you play Oracle, and you win. That's all you would do.
Yep, reminds me back when Jerry just put Dark Depths or whatever just in whatever he was playing.
Just shove it in whatever he was
just
playing.
Put it in whatever you're playing. It's fine. Yeah. If it gets there, great. All right, here. So for my number 7, this was another non-creature spell, but it was super duper cool. It's actually kind of expensive for what it is. And I think because it's so unique in what it does, but there was definitely the Sovereigns of Lost Alara had a big play in how Eldrazi Conscription just took over a format. It turns out when you make something to give something +10/+10, trample, and Annihilator 2, it's good enough to see standard play. Eldrazi Conscription was a rare from Rise of the Eldrazi. It's 8 generic mana for a rare tribal enchantment, Eldrazi Aura. I love it. It has enchant creature. An enchanted creature gets +10/+10 and has trample and Annihilator 2, which means whenever it attacks, defending player sacrifices 2 permanents.
Yeah.
It's like Build-A-Bear.
It's fine. Build a cruel. It's fine.
This answers the question. if cost wasn't an object, what would be the thing you would go get? Well, it's this, and it's not close.
Yeah.
It gives you the most. It gives the most power. It gives you the most stuff. It's the biggest. So Sovereigns of Lost Alara, Aura Swap was an ability on a Magic card. I think that people were trying to.
That was silly.
There was also Academy Researchers combo with this. People were just trying to get Eldrazi conscription to happen.
It was just
and
great.
It did with Sovereigns of Lost Alara.
Still fetches a pretty penny too, about $8 or $9, depending on where you get it from.
Exactly. So Sovereigns of Lost Alara, if you don't know, it says that whenever a creature attacks alone, you can go find an aura and put it on a creature. Well, guess which aura you want always.
Yeah.
It's this one.
You get this one.
Yeah. All right. So moving here to number 6, and I'm back in higher land. I'll be out of it at number 4. So Ruben, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is another of these Eldrazi aggro cards. This one, my first actual colorless entry on my list. It is Matter Reshaper. Two generic and a colorless.
Get it right.
For a 3/2 creature Eldrazi rare from Oath of the Gatewatch. When Matter Reshaper dies, reveal the top card of your library. You may put that card onto the battlefield if it's a permanent, including lands, with converted mana cost 3 or less. Otherwise, you just put the card in your hand. So It was kind of like a Coiling Oracle in reverse. In addition to being a 3-mana 3/2, it was just a Warpath Ghoul. It was already just fine stats in addition to being good on the battlefield. So, and if all at the low cost of 3 mana.
I don't know what extra bonus you get for having to jump through the wingding colorless mana hoop, but wow, it's a big payoff because this thing in Oath of the Gatewatch was one of my favorite designs. This is my number 10 because I love it, and the value you get out of this thing is just it's so good at the 3-drop. There's no better 3-drop certainly at the time in Standard. If you're playing the wastes, Eldrazi stuff, you just instant slam.
People were playing 3-color Collected Company decks and still playing 4 of this card.
Absolutely, because the value is insane. Okay, it's random, but whatever. I'll take a free land if it's there.
It draws a card. Who cares?
Yeah, it does nothing but good things for you. All right, Aaron, what's number 6?
My number 6 is not an Eldrazi creature. It is a tribal Eldrazi spell, but I'll never forget the first time I ran into this card. One of the best parts about playing Magic the Gathering is when people surprise you with cards you've never seen before. Because Magic is an extensive game. There's 16,000 cards or something?
More now,
And there are going to be cards that you've never seen before. And particularly when they get you, you're just like, what? And this card has definitely gotten me a couple times before. My number 6 is Not of This World.
Yeah, I love Not of This World.
So good.
So Not of This World was originally printed in Rise of the Eldrazi to 7 colorless tribal instant Eldrazi. Counter targets spell or ability that targets a permanent you control. Not of This World costs 7 less to cast if it targets a spell or ability that targets a creature you control with power 7 or greater. So it's free.
It's free.
It's free.
This is most often used to protect Merit Lage. If you're playing a sort of Dark Depths deck, it's very easy for them to just sort of, Caracas them or Swords of Plowshare it, and you just be like, whoop! And then it doesn't work anymore. And so I'll never forget the first time I saw this. I was like, excuse me?
Yeah.
And then someone showed it to me. It's only $1.50, $2 card, but not every deck wants it. But the ones that do,
if you want to protect Merit Lage or Gristlebrand, that's about it.
Yeah.
But if you want to, you got them.
Fun dorks you may want to do this. And it's almost a $10 foil, by the way.
Sure.
Because this card is dope. This card is led to just infinite blowouts.
This is the card that you talk about at BW3s after the tournament.
Yes.
And then he had Not of This World.
Yes. And you're like, you know what that card does? I'm like, what does that card do? And someone explains, you're like, what? How's it for free? It was tapped out. I was like, we're tapped out, man. Like, oh my God. This is blowout central was what this card provided. And I loved it. And it was great. All right, let's move on here to number 5. Ruben, what's number 5?
My number 5 is higher on somebody else's list.
Well, so is mine, Aaron.
So is mine.
Oh my God. We just bypassed number 5.
Don't have a 5. Okay.
Oh, man.
That's just going to make us weird.
Always hate it when you miss your 5 drop.
Wow. Well, let's move on here to number 4. Ruben, what you got?
My number 4 is higher on somebody else's list.
2 in a row. Aaron, what's your number 4?
Yeah, same here.
Wow.
Well, someone's got to have an entry at some point. Might as well be me. And I might as well kind of break the rules a little bit, kind of,
Okay.
sort of, for what to do in here. Look, you know, when WotC works a long time to provide us essentially a payoff. And they wanted a payoff to a storyline that involved two angels. There's Bruna. And there's Gisela.
Yeah.
And between the Bruna and the Gisela, they didn't just want to make them like, you know, weird versions of them or whatever, alternate versions of them or something. No. They created an entire new mechanic where you flip them over and you create a mega card.
Yep.
And when Bruna and Gisela get together, it's Brisella, much like Brangelina over here.
Yeah.
Brisella, Voice of Nightmares, is the result from Eldritch Moon. This is a mythic rare, ultimately, when you put them together. It's a legendary Eldrazi angel. It's a 9/10 with flying, first strike, vigilance, lifelink. Your opponents can't cast spells with converted mana cost 3 or less.
Yeah.
This saw almost no standard play, but the commander, and even commander, it's really hard to do because like if you get rid of it, it's hard to do. You got to play some really weird cards to like make this happen repeatedly. But this was one of the first images that we saw out of the new set. Like once the cat was out of the bag, that it was Emrakul. We started to see these nameless. You know how they always do like promotional art, but they don't really tell you like what it is. So we knew that an Eldrazi angel was coming, but we didn't know like who it was made up of. And to see, it's almost tragic in a way. You have Gisela and Bruna who are warped by Emrakul, and then eventually they warp into this horrifying thing that's just massive, and just really goes to show you how well they merged Emrakul with everything else. And this is just terrifying, and it's full of membranes and wings and blue, and just it's so over the top.
The whole meld mechanic of essentially you had to have Gisela, the Broken Blade out, and Bruna, the Fading Light,
shove them together.
Which was a 7 mana 5/7 for Bruna. So like they priced it well out of constructed. They didn't want this to be what wins the Pro Tour.
Right. I will never forget though that I was doing a tournament for Tales of Adventure, and our main match had just ended, and we switched the camera to the backup match, and there was a Brucella in the red zone, and I was like, and now we'll go to our battle. Oh my God! There's a Brucella, because it's twice as big as everything else on the battlefield.
Exactly.
Both in terms of stats and in terms of actual real estate. Seeing it in action just brought a smile to my face. And it is absolutely terrifying.
I wanted it to be a thing, trust me. I would love nothing more personally for this to be the Pro Tour winning card. Right. But they decided that was going to be something different, and we'll talk about it later. All right, let's move on here to our number 3. And I say our number 3 because we share some stuff. Hey, girl. You like the ulamag. I like the ulamag. I like a Titan. You like the Titan.
I also just like eating. I can relate to ulamag. I'm always a force as voracious as time itself. It's me. Like
it's very, very strong is the hunger that pulls you to ulamag, the ceaseless hunger. This was the one that showed up in Battle for Zendikar. Aaron, tell us what ulamag, the ceaseless hunger, does.
Gladly. So ulamag is 10 colorless for 10 power, 10 toughness. When you cast ulamag, exile 2 target permanents. So ulamag doesn't have to resolve. This is a cast trigger, and so you're still getting that exile regardless. It does have indestructible, and then whenever ulamag attacks, defending player exiles the top 20 cards of his or her library. So even if you're able to chump block this, well, that's cute. You're still milling, and milling 20 cards at a time, you're not long for this world.
I'm sorry, did you say that you're milling with this card? Can you say that again for me? Well, just so Evan doesn't get on my case about this being on my top 10 mill cards.
It's because it exiles. It doesn't actually mill. I'm sorry.
I heard on good authority that it mills.
You can hear all things, and it's fine. This became one of the defining spells of the historic format in Magic Arena. I play this in my Forsaken Monument deck. This is the thing I want to untap with after I play Forsaken Monument. It fixes all the problems. I have not milled, but exiled many cards with this, where people are just like, I can live through ulamag attacking. Right. No, you can't. No, you
Turns
can't.
out you can survive 2 turns of damage or 3 turns of attacking, and that's it.
And that's it. That's the game. It's the ball game. And
this card was also the main thing that you would put into play with your either Works Marvel. It's a great payoff in your Tron decks. I mean, it's seen a ton of play all over the place.
Yeah, the fact that you got that cast trigger off the Aetherworks Marvel is just gross.
Yeah.
That's where they
But
really
I think it
screwed
says
up.
something when you're able to, the Eldrazi, those were such big shoes to fill. And, the fact that no one even really talks about OG Ulamog anymore.
Yeah.
Like this is the new, it took a while for the modern Tron decks to really adopt it. But once they did, and then you saw the birth of Eldrazi Tron, and then now you have Cloud Post and Legacy. And so it's just amazing how this card just kind of took over. And that's not easy to do.
Yeah, exiling 2 permanents is no joke.
It's a big game.
Which is fantastic. But Ruben, you have a unique number 3.
I do. Well, it's not
be?
unique, I wouldn't say. It's just I happen to have it rated the highest. This card has trampled over many formats in its time, from Eldrazi aggro in Standard and Modern, all the way back to Legacy and Vintage in various aggressive shells, from Mud to Eldrazi Tron to Red aggro to everything in between. Reality Smasher is my number 3.
Goodness.
Reality Smasher is 4 generic and a colorless for a 5/5 with trample and haste. And that would be good enough. But whenever Reality Smasher becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, counter that spell unless its controller discards a card. So you can't even Swords to Plowshares it unless you discard a card.
Yeah, this is my number 5. I mean, this card is terrifying. One of the things that always stuck out to me about this card is the art. Where is the head on this?
Yeah, there's not. It's just like weird legs with spikes coming at you.
It's towards the middle there, and there's a bit of a buff chest there. But a lot of people always think the arms are different. And so this is a really, really cool. This is peak Eldrazi right here. You have the Kozilek effect of sort of the rainbow, lattices everywhere, the kind of warping that you see here. Jason Rainville killed this. And this card will kill you. It comes out so fast. If you're going to do aggressive Eldrazi, this is where you want to be. And so between, the Ancient Tombs and the Eldrazi temples, this thing comes out terribly, terribly easy. You need to deal with it right away. Blocking really isn't going to help you. And just holy crap.
there were the 3 Titans. There was Emrakul, Ulamog, and Kozilek, and they each had their own unique kind of look. And I think this was Kozilek's, where it had the spiky
Kozilek,
the spiky stuff that kind of was around
and
the
it
head.
Also led to some theories too, down the line in terms of why Emrakul didn't really stick around on Innistrad. And a lot of people, the theory that I really liked is that each of the Eldrazi prepares the way for her, where you have Ulamog that sort of, makes everything this weak bone-like substance.
Right.
And then Kozilek comes and turns it into this prismatic stuff. And then Emrakul comes and kind of warps everything. And because these two hadn't really paved the way for her, she says something along the lines of why isn't this plane happy to see me? Or why is it not ready yet or something? And I love that theory. And so, when we fully recovered from Eldrazi fatigue, I would love to really know what Emrakul's got going on.
Yeah.
At the end of it, she makes it squishy. All right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I guess that's one of the options. But
everything is tentacles.
Yeah.
Nice. Let's move on here to
that was my number 5 if I didn't say that.
Yes, you did. And that was my number 9 as well, as I love a reality smasher. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2, again, is... the Reality Smasher and this card are the reasons why we had Eldrazi Winter. And to this day, this card is a dominating force in multiple formats. I believe this is the Eldrazi that has the most top finishes across all formats. It saw play in Eldrazi aggro, it saw play in Tron, it saw play in Mud, but it takes something special for when you're a colorless card and then you show up in Yisan EDH decks and Mardu vehicles. You know what I mean? These decks that aren't Eldrazi centric but are still running Thought Not Seer.
Oof.
Thought Not Seer is 3 generic and a colorless for a 4/4 Eldrazi. When Thought Not Seer enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it and exile that card. Yeah. When Thought Not Seer leaves the battlefield, target opponent draws a card. So on the surface, it feels sort of a little bit like a Mesmeric Fiend or a Kitesail Freebooter, but it's not. First of all, it's a clock in and of itself. It's a 4/4, so you can't bolt it. You can't trade with it easily. And 2, they don't get that card back ever. They draw a card.
Right. Yeah, so this is my number 4, and this is the Eldrazi deck really is the perfect combination of what a deck needs to do. Sometimes when you're facing a combo deck, you can disrupt them, but if you don't have a way to close out the game, they're just going to draw what they need and eventually kill you. And you also can't be just brute force because you still have to deal with a really fast combo. This changed all of that. It's a very big, it disrupts you and then it can kill you. And so it's that perfect combination of, aggression and disruption, that makes it really hard for combo decks to come back from this. You can usually survive one, but if you get like 2 thought knots picking your hand apart, you're in for a really bad time.
Well, because this will definitely take the sorcery speed answer if you had one. This will take away the planeswalker answer. 60% of the time, you're going to draw land. That's just how it works. So,
and that art is just wild.
Oh
Svetlin Velenov just completely killed this.
Completely crushed it, which was awesome. And so it was weirdly creepy, but it was just so effective. And I know these days we don't really care about 4/4s for 4, but back in the day, this was an exciting mana cost to power toughness
and this still
ratio.
Sees play all the way back to Vintage. Eldrazi Stompy is still a thing. It is very possible to get this thing out on turn 1 and then just have a 4/4, and that's obnoxious.
This thing is your best card. You say that it's not. Look, we just had Omnath get banned. 4/4s for 4 are still on vogue.
Good.
This thing, Questing Beast, this is slightly better than. I think that this would still see play even today, even with very few colorless mana producers available in the format.
Sure. And this was my number 6. It was Aaron's number 4, and that card was absolutely fantastic. So, Aaron, what's number 2?
My number 2, so I mentioned these new Eldrazi having really big shoes to fill. And, we love Ulamag and we love the OG Kozilek and we love OG Emrakul. And when we knew that we were getting new versions, we wondered how they were going to hold up. And, while the new Ulamag has certainly done a really good job, we were curious about the new Emrakul, because that's Emrakul, the baddest bitch in the multiverse. And, I have to say, even though she doesn't have the same, format warping appeal across multiple formats, she still did a pretty big number on Standard when she was legal. My number 2 is Emrakul, the Promised End. So Emrakul, the Promised End is 13 colorless, from Eldritch Moon, legendary creature Eldrazi, 13 power, 13 toughness, which was a bit of a theme in Shadows over Innistrad and was one of the clues that really, made you wonder who was behind all of this nonsense happening on the plane. Emrakul costs 1 colorless less to cast for each card type among cards in your graveyard. So she essentially has Delirium, which was again the big mechanic for the set. When you cast Emrakul, you gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, that player takes an extra turn, and it also has flying, trample, and protection from instants. So Delirium was frighteningly easy to get in Standard. You had Vestal of Nascency, you had Grim Flayer, you had Liliana the Last Hope, and I'll never forget that last Pro Tour where it really came down to Liliana versus Emrakul. Yep. And Emrakul really just dominated that Standard. It felt bad. A lot of Standard players had never had the joy of losing to a Mindslaver. And so the idea of taking a turn just never felt good. And this was a really controversial card, but I think it held up pretty well. It still goes for about $35. It's only been printed once. Beautiful art. You really feel like it almost looks rubbery. You almost feel like you could touch those tentacles. Yeah. And if you look at the full art version from the posters, you really see the madness of Innistrad, fires everywhere and people running and screaming. And then, this beautiful shot of Emrakul.
Yeah, this was my number 5, with Ceaseless Hunger as my number 4, if I didn't mention that before. But,
nice, this is my number 5 as well.
Yep, Promised End is just spectacular. And it did finally win a Pro Tour or a Players Tour level event in Brussels in 2020 in the hands of Joel Larson when he won with Sultide Delirium. With, again, lots of great ways to put stuff into your graveyard. Saner Wayfinder, Jace Vryn's Prodigy, among others. And, of course, fighting alongside Emrakul in this deck is a copy of Liliana the Last Hope, which I guess really brings it all together.
I mean, this card was banned January 9th, 2017, alongside Smuggler's Copter and Reflector Mage. And it's one of those things that it's a slave to the theme. It was it has to be 13 mana. No, it doesn't. But it has to be 13 mana because it's a 13-13. And it's 13 plus 13, 13, blah, blah, blah. Right. Aren't we super clever? Well, that's awesome. But when you can put 7 different card types in your yard or whatever, and this thing's
6,
5 or 6 mana, it's absolutely ridiculous how powerful this thing was. And even at the time, a lot of the pros, but before the Pro Tour or players, whatever, what the hell they call it these days,
before
the grand finals, no one gave a damn about this card. They didn't even think it was that good. They were like, that seems weird and whatever. And literally all the pros were playing it. It was the only thing they were playing amongst the top teams. This card was absolutely everywhere. And they're like, you need to understand how stupidly good this card is. And it went on, of course, to win the whole thing. Emrakul the Promised End was great, but should have been at least 15 mana. Like, at least... Not 13. That was bad. And they've admitted as such. But, man, it leaves behind a very exciting card now, doesn't it?
Yes. Of course.
All right. So, for my number 2, I mean, if we're going to be talking about them Titans, and none of y'all, best I can figure, have not thrown down for my boy Cozy.
No, we haven't.
Kozilek,
Put your windows down.
of Truth. Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, was literally one of the first images you ever got from Rise of the Eldrazi. They had this thing on the website at the time where it was like, go to this webpage and you click this thing and like from the bottom, like coming out of nowhere comes Kozilek, Butcher of Truth all over the screen. It doesn't work anymore, but it was neat for the time.
Yeah. And
they pumped this thing out. Guys were over $50 in every single printing. Does not matter. Kozilek, Butcher of Truth came to us originally as a mythic from Rise of the Eldrazi. It's 10 generic mana for a 12/12 legendary Eldrazi. When you cast this spell, that's that cast trigger, you draw 4 cards. It has Annihilator of 4. Whenever this creature attacks, defending player sacrifices 4 permanents. And when it is put into a graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles their graveyard into their library.
Annihilator is such a stupid ability.
So stupid.
So dumb.
It sounds a little crazy to get to 10 mana, but it's not. And of course,
it's really not.
Played recently. Lord God, it's not. But yeah, this was a thing where it was like, wow, I can just draw 4 cards. I don't care if you counter it. I'm going to be able to just keep getting advantage out of it.
Right.
And it's
I very nearly put the Great Distortion Kozilek on my list, which is 8 generic and 2 colorless for a 12/12.
It's true.
Which was the Return Oath of the Gatewatch version.
Right.
That also draws cards. That is also bigger than its casting cards. Whatever. But yes, Kozilek these days I feel like is the one that sees the most casual play.
Yeah.
Because drawing 4 cards, it's also the cheapest of the original Eldrazi at 10 mana, and it replaces cards in your hand. So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is such card advantage. Annihilator 4 is just dumb. Like, if you've not played against Annihilator...
Annihilator is such a stupid ability.
You normally get, like, 1, maybe 2 swings from an Annihilator creature before you're just completely out of the game.
Yeah.
The game's just done. You're just like, okay, I have no permanents, and we're done. And that's,
right.
That was
it
our
made
fun
sense
match.
in the Rise of the Eldrazi limited environment where everybody had a bunch of O1s.
Right. When everyone had a ton of permanents, but even then, it was still just...
then it was crazy.
It was crazy. All right, let's move on here to our number 1. And I do say our number 1. It is the same for every single person.
I mean, there's nobody else it could be.
Yeah,
I mean, it has all of the things we look for, over the top, multi-format dominance, tournament pedigree, and just really set the tone, for the Eldrazi as these, kaiju, these Godzilla-type monsters that were meant to just devour worlds. Nothing really does that better, than Emrakul the Aeons Torn.
Emrakul the Aeons Torn was a mythic from Rise of the Eldrazi, a 15 mana, 15/15, a legendary Eldrazi, of course. And it can't be countered because, why not?
Because if you're paying 15.
You're paying 15,
but who's
y'all.
paying 15 now?
Well, when you cast this spell, you take an extra turn after this one. That's where we start.
Okay. All right.
Flying, protection from colored spells, Annihilator 6. When Emrakul the Aeon Storm is put into a graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles their graveyard into their library.
Yeah.
So this creature answered the question, how much stuff can we put on one creature before it's too good, before we are at a breaking point?
Right.
They will never make a creature that is bigger, splashier, with more stuff than Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. This is the thing you want to put into play with a show and tell. This is the thing you want to cast with an Omniscience. This is the thing you want to cast with your millions of mana in your Enchantress deck or whatever else you're casting. This is the thing you want to put into play with a sneak attack. This is the creature that you want in those types of combo decks.
I feel like until there's a creature that says when this enters the battlefield, take an extra turn after this one, this is going to be kind of the default. If we get the cast trigger, it's stupid and the game's over. If I sneak attack this thing, Annihilator 6, good luck. GG.
And 15 damage, yeah.
Yeah, plus 15 damage. Like, it's ridiculous. And protection from colored spells. Like, that's one of those you got to untap, and you had to pat the Exile or the Maelstrom Pulse or whatever, and it just doesn't matter.
And, so many ways to get this for free. Show and tell is a thing. Sneak attack is a thing. You can even Oath of Druids into this if you want to. Strap a Dragon Breath on it and have a really good time. And so I just love seeing all the ways that people get around actually paying for it.
Right. And there's also, don't forget that if this is in your graveyard, that is a trigger. So you have Shallow Grave and you have Goryo's Vengeance.
This is also win condition in the early Enchantresses list in Legacy. You would just build a wall of crappy enchantments, and then you'd have a Sarah's Sanctum, and then whoop.
And here's a 15/15 and an extra
giant monster. Yep. There's been tons of awesome promos. There was literally they used to give everybody the same promo at pre-releases, and this was it. They used to give you
Rise of the Eldrazi pre-release promo.
Yeah. Nowadays it's just $20. It used to be $50, but they reprinted it 2 or 3 times. There's still a $55 plus Pro Tour promo.
I love that one so much.
Yeah, that one looks really, really cool. There's who doesn't love it, right? Like, it's sweet. It fits into any commander deck you want. Like,
if it weren't banned in Commander.
If it weren't, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Because it was dumb. Because Annihilator 6 isn't that fun to play.
It's so stupid.
All right.
Yeah.
But it don't matter. You're still going to play in your older formats. It's still crazy cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I lost to it the other day. Yeah.
True. And Ruben, what's number 4 again?
My number 4 was Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. My number 5 was Emrakul, the Promised End.
Yes, and my number 3 was Ulamog, so I was right ahead of you on that one.
There you go.
All right, so that was our top 10 Eldrazi cards. You'll see them on screen right now if you review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Now, I'm thinking Aaron is Emrakul, right? I think Aaron's Emrakul.
Well, that makes you Ulamog.
That would make me Ulamog and you Kozilek.
I'm definitely Kozilek.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we settled this.
You're the spindly one, right? Yeah, Aaron's just over there in charge.
They used to call me the Promised End in college. Hey,
whoa. Wow. Hey, that's pre-show. That's not main show material, ladies and gentlemen. $4.99. Patreon.com. You too.
That's right.
Yeah. Can hear us talk about our Promised Ends. As we go to our final slide. All right. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at MagicMikes, on Twitter at MagicMikesCast, our Magic Mike subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at MagicMikesPodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at MagicMikesPodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes and Spotify. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.